Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take for Market Rebellion on this Tuesday morning. We had a bit of an interesting day yesterday, but the ranges have been kind of coming in a little bit tighter, a little bit tighter. We did have an afternoon sort of a push to the downside, and then we were able to rally off of that. As a matter of fact, the Dow just finishing down very, very modestly small to the downside. Matter of fact, the NASDAQ, kind of the same thing. The losses from that midday were recovered. And we finished just a little bit off. We had crude oil that was having a really nice day once again up there towards 107, 108. We look over at the volatility index. It's still holding well above 20, but closed out the day around 2250. I take a look over at volumes. Wow, kind of a yawner, quite honestly. And maybe that's because of the contraction that we are seeing in the movement, at least a little bit of late. But 33.6 million contracts, not one single stock trading over a million contracts yesterday. That's quite a statement after averaging closer to 41, 42, 43 million contracts a day, and a little bit of a pause certainly yesterday. The odd part also, we're just kicking off earnings season. You would expect to see a little bit more activity. We weren't really seeing a whole lot of that yesterday. And as I said, a much more contracted sort of a range for the big, broader markets themselves. Energy, leader, absolutely, up 1.5%. Financials did very well. We've been watching that 10-year as it's approaching 2.8s, now even the 2.9s. We'll talk about that in just a second. Consumer discretion, you look at technology, they finished in the positive, but not by a whole lot. One of the drags on the market itself was the leadership that we'd had in those first few months of the year, but that was healthcare. And healthcare down about 1% yesterday. We did have a nice big pop out of names like Twitter yesterday. We look at some of those beta energy names as well. Occidental. I look at Phillips 66. I look at Valero. Some of those names all positive and moving to the upside, and they continue to have a nice path to the upside. Financials absolutely leading to the upside yesterday as well. They were up about 0.6%, but what were some of the names moving? Goldman Sachs, once again, pretty daggone good day. JP Morgan participating along with Bank of America. And then you look over at something like a Capital One as well. Throw in Freeport-McMoRan for those materials. Pretty decent day all the way around. Now, that doesn't mean everything was working, however. Schwab, definitely not working. We talk about financials really having a pretty decent day. Schwab, not part of that whole move to the upside. And as a matter of fact, they were pretty harshly hit to the downside, along with Moderna, Etsy, PVH, some of those names, Zoom, Zscaler, throw in Lucid, Docu, you get the idea. And then as far as the Dow, take a look at Honeywell and Disney and Nike, all pulling a little bit to the downside. So you can see some of the pulls, but overall, things were okay. And as a matter of fact, like I say, just finishing the down just off a little bit on the major indices. Now you shift over to today. Markets looked like they were going to open completely flat, right where we were yesterday. And as we got to the opening bell, we just took off on the Dow. It was up over 100 points. NASDAQ still staying fairly flat. We got early a push towards about 280 points. NASDAQ starts to participate a little bit, up about 100. Last I looked, we were up nearly 400 points on the Dow and about 165 points on the NASDAQ. So a nice big recovery off of what looked like a fairly flat start to the day. And we are zooming to the upside right now. Crude oil was around 105, easing back. It's just underneath 104. We'll keep an eye on that. Take a look at the 10-year, 2.9. It actually is at the highest levels right now since going back to 2018, and a big move out of Bitcoin. Bitcoin early on up over 41,000, up about 4%. I just took another look at it. It's up 5.25%, about 41,500, having a pretty nice recovery after getting underneath that 40,000 level for a couple of sessions in a row. Most of this morning, once we got into this day, and we're only an hour deep into it, but all the sectors, every single sector, at moments at least, have been in the green. And energy was the leader. Then they've moved over towards flat. Materials were down a little bit. Then they started moving to the upside, up about 0.5%. Technology up about 1%. Then I look over at the financials, again, having a great day, up about 1%. Throw in those semiconductors, and you've got yourself a nice reason why we are moving to the upside at the pace that we are right now. J&J, the earnings were kind of mixed, and yet the takeaway was very, very positive. And that stock is definitely grinding and pushing and actually pulling the markets to the upside, along with Nike. Throw in Boeing, throw in Stryker, some of these kind of names. Look at Ford as well, Lulu, Ross Stores, Netflix, all moving into the positive and moving into a positive in a pretty big way. Not everything is perfect. Twitter down a little bit. Pfizer's down a little bit. I took a look over at Moderna. That was down as well. Some of those Chinese names with a little bit of a pull with PDD and JD and NetEase, a little bit of a pull, as well as Lucid. They throw in Zoom, and then you got the idea. But generally, we are looking at a pretty decent market early on and a nice shift from what we had seen yesterday where we were having a little bit of trouble. We will be watching, obviously, midday. That seems to be the time of day where we've seen some of that movement from the markets kind of pulling towards the downside. We'll see if that's going to play out today as well. I got two unusuals, and then I'm out of here. I am not on the noon show, but I will be on the 5 o'clock show with Melissa Lee and the gang later on today on Fast Money. So, number one, I've got TJX. Now, we haven't talked about this name in a while. We hadn't seen a lot of unusual option activity in here for a while. Stock was trading a little bit over 63, about 63.30, somewhere in that camp. And 6,300 of the April 22nd expiring, yep, that's Friday, the 65 calls getting bought. 15 cents up to about 32 cents. Fairly inexpensive option. But remember, this is a time constraint. This does expire on Friday. Somebody the other day said, well, what do you do when you talk about some of these things that expire very shortly? That means you've definitely got to be on top of it and watching it and making sure that you fully understand that this is a very, very short-term run that somebody is purchasing these 6,300 in TJX. I got another one that's very short-term as well, CCL. Now, we talk about the cruise ships. We talk about gambling. We talk about a lot of these different things and the movement. Win today, I think, for having a pretty decent day. But take a look at this one now. CCL trading about 1950, maybe a little bit above that right now. 8,000 of this Friday, April 22nd, the expiring of the 19 and a half calls. So in other words, stock trading right there. They are buying those calls right on top of it, looking for a little bit of a push to the upside. About 6,100 of that 8,000 was in a single print. Those are the big boy trades when they come in with some of those. I know the dollar amount's a little bit less, 33 cents up to about 47 cents. But when you see those big prints where you've got 6,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, those are where you're seeing some of those bigger money, certainly most likely coming from whether that's hedge funds or wherever, but very, a lot more commitment to those kind of trades. We're not just trailing and following along with a bunch of 10 lots. We're looking at for those size trades and those meaningful trades from what we consider some of the, or most of the time, as that smart money. Folks, have a great day of trading. Should be a wonderful day. It's going to be really interesting, and I look forward to seeing you around 5 o'clock Eastern time today on Fast Money.